Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our closing plenary session. At this time, please welcome to the stage Kim Johnson, Senior Director of Policy, National Low Income Housing Coalition.
I don't think this is on. Hello? Oh, there I am. Sweet. Hi, everybody. It's my pleasure to welcome you here today. I'm Kim Johnson. I'm the Senior Director of Policy here at the National Low Income Housing Coalition. Oh, thank you. Thank you for the hoots. I paid them to do that. I'm delighted to welcome you all here to our closing plenary session for our 2026 Policy Forum. I wanted to start off by thanking you all for being here. Whether you traveled from across the country or across the street, we're delighted to have you. I also want to extend my gratitude to my wonderful colleagues for all of the time and effort they've put into pulling off this conference, and to the hotel staff for their help throughout. We were last together 1 year ago, and I think that it is safe to say that it has been a hard year. It's been a chaotic and in many ways cruel year. But despite the chaos, we continue to organize, and despite the cruelty, we continue this work of compassion and frankly of love. Because as hard as things are now, and they are indeed hard, there is going to be a tomorrow. There is a future and something that comes after this moment of chaos and cruelty, and together we have the power to shape it. That's why I stay in this fight, and why I'm so proud to be doing this work alongside you all, because I believe that together we can change things for the better, and I thank you all for continuing to show up too. To kick off our closing plenary, I'm excited to introduce a video from Minnesota Senator Tina Smith. Last year, Senator Smith received NLIHC's Edward W. Brooke Housing Leadership Award for her incredible leadership improving access to safe, decent, and affordable housing in communities across the nation, and in particular, rural and tribal areas.
Hi, everyone. I'm United States Senator Tina Smith from Minnesota. Thank you for inviting me to say a few words at the Housing Policy Forum today. Everyone deserves the freedom and the opportunity to build the life that they want, and that starts with having a home. Having a roof over your head and a safe place to sleep with dignity and privacy is a human right. But sadly, millions of our friends and family members and neighbors struggle to find and to keep a home. We see this in big cities and in small towns and on tribal lands. Right now, it's even more challenging for immigrants and new Americans to find and stay in their homes. People are scared to show up at work, fearing that they'll be taken off the streets by masked federal agents. Small business owners have had to put their dreams on hold and close their doors. Hardworking folks have missed their paychecks, and that makes it impossible to pay rent or mortgage on time. And during all this chaos, there has been a glimmer of hope. Minnesotans came together and stood strong in the face of tyranny. We joined forces in proclaiming that we are all equal and that we all deserve equal treatment. This basic humanity is why I make it a priority to reach across the aisle and to push for more affordable homes in urban and rural and tribal communities. Together, we've worked to end veterans' homelessness, and we've introduced the first bipartisan bill in over a decade to make that a reality. And right now, we're working to get the historic 21st Century Road to Housing Act passed and signed into law, which includes many of our shared goals. With your help, we will continue to educate and mobilize and to share public opinion on housing policy. This work is not easy, but with champions like you all, I know that we can make it happen. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Smith, and thank you to the good people of Minnesota for really showing us how to stand against what's happening and stand together for our neighbors to keep each other safe. So I'm excited to welcome to the stage Alia Fierro, Senior Housing Policy Advisor for the Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs under Ranking Member Elizabeth Warren. Alia has been working tirelessly with her counterparts across the aisle to help pull together the 21st Century Road to Housing Act, the largest bipartisan housing supply bill in decades that actually passed the Senate just a couple hours ago. Yeah. Yes, with overwhelming bipartisan support by a vote of 89 to 10. So this bill combines nearly all of the provisions from the Senate's bipartisan Road to Housing Act with some of the provisions included in the House's bipartisan Housing for the 21st Century Act. This unified package includes some of NLIHC's priorities, including the Reforming Disaster Recovery Act, a top priority for NLIHC's Disaster Housing Recovery Coalition, the Rural Housing Service Reform Act, which includes provisions to help ensure and preserve affordable housing opportunities for over 400,000 rural families, and some important provisions from the Choice in Affordable Housing Act that would make it faster and easier for voucher recipients to access housing in neighborhoods of their choice. Alia, welcome and thank you so much for joining, and congratulations. Leah. So good to see you. Thank you. So thank you, Alia, for joining. Almost a year ago, Senator Warren joined our policy forum and discussed the possibility of a bipartisan housing package. And now here we are with the 21st Century Road to Housing Act passed in the Senate. Can you talk a little bit about what the process of putting this bill together was like?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I'm glad to see so many people here. I think when you're in the weeds of getting a bill across the finish line, you can become very bogged down in the details and the to-do list that you have. So thank you for the question, because this bill has really been a long time coming. I joined Ranking Member Warren last May and hit the ground running with, negotiating the bill with Chair Scott's team. But a lot of work went into this bill even before I started on the committee, even last Congress, when the committee had been trying to negotiate a bipartisan housing bill. And a lot of the bills that ultimately were included in the deal we were able to strike this Congress have been in the making for a long time. Like, maybe a lot of you in the room have even helped to write some of those bills and provide TA on a lot of those bills. So it's been a long process. At the beginning of this Congress, the ranking member and the chair at the first hearing on housing agreed that housing needed to be a #1 priority for the committee, and they got straight to work. It's been interesting to see how there are a lot of shared goals across the aisle, but it's just reaching the language that everyone can agree to. So it's a lot of nitty-gritty work that goes into, crafting every word and line that goes into a piece of legislation.
Absolutely. And, like you said, a lot of the people in this room have had a hand in helping to draft some of the bills that were included in this package, providing technical assistance around some of the provisions. What are some of the anticipated impacts of the bill? What are some of your favorite parts? And what do you see as kind of the impact in both the immediate and the long term?
Yeah, so there's going to be a variety of impacts from different provisions over time. So you will see the impacts of some of them sooner than others, but at the core of the bill, it is a housing supply bill. And the goal is to not only help incentivize localities to do zoning reform and to reduce burdensome processes at the local level, whether it's long permitting processes or helping to streamline environmental reviews at the federal level so that we can speed up the process of constructing new affordable housing. That we all know in this room, it takes a long time to build housing. It can take years. And so we'll need to be patient to see that impact. Some of the other pieces that might have a faster effect, and we'll see those go into play, is, for example, having federal agencies look at existing lending programs to see how different rules and requirements can be tweaked to make sure that builders that are focusing on manufactured housing or modular housing actually have financing products that work for their business type. So, for example, on modular, people need funding at the point of when they're working in the factory, but currently, federal rules only give them the distribution of the loan funds at the point that they arrive to the site where they're going to construct. So that's something that really can delay, puts like an upfront capital requirement on the lender. It just makes it harder to get those modular homes built. There's also provisions that would not require that a permanent chassis, so like the metal hitch that's on a manufactured home, it would no longer require that I guess, outdated at this point in some ways requirement. So giving communities more options and more affordable options to get manufactured housing built. The other thing I would mention, community development block grant, disaster recovery funding. We all know how important those funds are for low and moderate income communities, but also for uninsured households when disasters hit. Right now, every time Congress appropriates funds, HUD has to stand up new rules and has to, communities need more, need to know what to expect when applying for these funds. So what the bill does is it permanently authorizes the CDBG-DR program to make the rules of the road really clear and to get that funding out before, so that the funds are ready when a disaster hits, as opposed to having to wait for Congress to pass funding into law. Yeah, there's a lot in the package. There's something for everyone, flexibilities for communities to help reduce homelessness, help for veterans to ensure that they can access affordable homeownership and know what options are available to them. It runs the gamut of really every housing issue.
Absolutely. And I'd like to put in a respectful request to the folks behind the stage to keep it down a little bit, because I can hear you talking. So respectfully, pipe down. So the big question, right, is how does this come together in the House? What do you see as the path forward? So the bill that we just moved on the floor today, which got a very great vote, we've had, thank you. It's been a long last week of many procedural votes in the Senate, so it was cool to see the final vote happen and to get that over the finish line. But essentially the vehicle that we moved was the Housing for the 21st Century Act, which the House passed in November under suspension. We used that as the vehicle, hitched on Road to Housing Act, so renamed it 21st Century Road to Housing Act. It includes all of the provisions that had already passed through the Senate and also included the broad majority of all the bipartisan housing provisions that passed on the House side. And we now send that back over to the House. And as two co-equal chambers in Congress, the House will have to do its own assessment and decide how they're going to handle the bill, whether that is just voting it off the House floor so that it goes to the president's desk for signature, or going to a conference. So what that means is we would come together with the House and decide how are we going to reconcile differences, or how, if there are no differences, how are we going to reconcile technical fixes that maybe need to be made to the bill. But we just passed it today off the House floor or Senate floor, so I think time will tell, and we'll see once our House colleagues have had a chance to take a look what they think and what path they want to take. Definitely. And do you have any advice for advocates who, one, are looking to secure the priorities that we have for low-income families and communities in that bill? What advice would you give them in kind of reaching out to their members to make sure those priorities stay in the next steps of the 21st Century Road to Housing Act? Yeah.
So one thing I will highlight is that there were a lot of really great provisions that we had secured in the Senate that didn't move with the House package that passed last month. So, sorry, CDBG-DR is a big one that's in there, so that's why I keep mentioning it. But CDBG-DR, as well as rural housing reforms, you mentioned to preserve housing for 400,000 households. That provision was not included in the House package. So this is the part that really matters, is making sure that all of these really important provisions stay together, move together, because without every single one, there will be, a population, a community that isn't going to be served to the best that they could be through the bill. So I think when you're, reaching out to your House members, you're talking to staffers, I think really just driving home the provisions that you want to see stay in that came over from the Senate side is really important, and moving together with coalition members and other stakeholders across the industry to keep the package whole.
Absolutely, and certainly as the bill continues moving through Congress, NLIHC and our advocates are going to be there to help out, to help provide you with information, keep you updated on what's going on, and to continue these important conversations with lawmakers to make sure that those priorities remain in any final package. So we get a lot of questions from advocates who are navigating their own challenging political environments in their communities about building bipartisan consensus. What advice would you give them?
I think it's interesting because obviously at the local level, politics can be so different from the federal. Like just watching state legislatures and city councils and stuff, I feel like there's just such a broad array of politics along the political spectrum. Something that I really enjoyed in the process of negotiating road with Chair Scott's team is seeing how we all have a shared interest in solving a problem and just being able to have concerted conversations where we're sitting down and we're actually thinking through the issue, how we each view the issue, to understand why I or someone else might approach the problem differently. The way that we all see the problem really informs how we try to address the problem. And so I think having that space to actually have the deep conversations, to actually talk about the nuances of the problem, helps us reach maybe more agreement on how, not just agreement, but like a middle ground on how we're going to solve the problem.
It sounds like it's helpful to find the commonalities so you stop talking across each other and start talking to each other and finding those areas of agreement where you can really build that consensus.
Yeah, and if I could give an example, I don't know how closely everyone in the room has been following, but one of the things that informed the bill that moved on the floor today was when the House passed its housing package, the White House put out a statement of support saying the White House supports housing legislation. However, any final package that reaches the president's desk, I'm paraphrasing, needs to include the president's top priorities, including a ban on institutional investors in single-family housing. So obviously in politics, you read the tea leaves and you're like, okay, well, whatever package we move in the Senate is going to have to include a solution to that presidential priority. So yeah, you have Democrats and Republicans coming to a table to negotiate a ban on institutional investor owners of single-family housing. So that was a interesting journey. Obviously, we have different, the Scott team, Republicans, our team, Democrats, we have different views of the problem. But we were able to come to a common understanding because we were tasked with this assignment, put in a room and told, solve the problem. But had we not sat down to talk about such a sticky issue, I don't know if Congress ever would have done something on the issue.
Right, really, wow. And it's been a priority for your boss, Elizabeth Warren, for so long too, so it's exciting to see something finally move on institutional investors.
Yeah.
So we are looking ahead into the next year, too. We're going to have a new congressional session, the 120th, which also means the potential for new opportunities to push the needle even further on affordable housing and homelessness policy to get more of the investments and policy changes we need. Your boss, Senator Warren, has been a champion for the long-term, large-scale housing investments, including by making historical investments in the National Housing Trust Fund and by expanding the availability of housing vouchers. So in the event of a Democrat-controlled Senate next year, your boss would be the Banking Committee chair, which gives her a lot of power over what issues are prioritized. How do you anticipate the committee's priorities changing?
Well, I'll start by saying that one of the things that the senator is really focused on, especially as next steps, I'll just say after road to begin with, and then I can get into next year and whatever that might look like. One of the pieces that we had to come to agreement on with Republicans was that the bill would not have an effect on spending. So what that means is you can authorize a program, but you cannot fund the program. So the next big hurdle is going to be through the appropes process and making sure that we are tackling the next fight, which is securing funding for these great programs that we've stood up, whether they're pilots or permanent or otherwise. So that's one thing, is getting the funding for this bill. The second part, in terms of what next Congress might look like, as you said, my boss is very focused on increasing investments to actually get affordable housing built. She has her American Housing and Economic Mobility Act, which includes billions of dollars to help actually get the funding that is needed out there to make sure that the homes that are getting built are affordable and attainable to every single household in this country. We know through great research from the National Income Housing Coalition that I think I'm saying this correctly, the only subset of the population that has an absolute shortage of housing is extremely low-income households. And so if we follow the data and we put our money where our mouth is, we need to be investing in the Housing Trust Fund. We need to be investing in the voucher program to make sure that everyone can access housing. So I think that, in addition to oversight, anyone who knows Elizabeth Warren knows that she loves a good letter to bring attention to all of these important issues. I think those are the things that we would be really focused on.
Absolutely. And so regardless of who controls the Senate next year, the Senate's filibuster rule, which requires at least 60 votes in order for a bill to pass in the chamber, essentially guarantees that bipartisanship is going to be required in some capacity in order to get a proposal to pass in the Senate. How do you think the committee will continue working to strengthen bipartisan cooperation regardless of how the election goes in November?
Yeah, I think the good thing for us is that we have built such a strong relationship with Chair Scott and his team. You know, my boss, the ranking member, she has an actually good, friendly relationship with Chair Scott. Like, at hearings, they're talking to each other. They're talking not just about ideas, but like, how are you doing? And I think this would set us up for a really good situation in the case that we were to take back the majority, or that we continue working with Republicans in the minority. Just having that foundation, I think, is critical.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Alia, for joining us, and thank you so much for your work. And congratulations again on getting the bill over the finish line in the Senate. We can't wait to see what comes next, and we're going to be alongside every step of the way to make sure we get something good secured.
Yeah, thank you to NLIHC and all of you in the room who have helped to champion the bill and getting legislation across the finish line. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you all. Thank you, good? All right. Before I get to mosey off stage, I have the honor of introducing our next panel as they start getting set up over here. Thanks again to Alia for joining us and for the important work that you and your colleagues on the committee are doing. I am excited to introduce our next panel, When Housing is Out of Reach, which is a discussion moderated by NLIHC Senior Vice President of Policy, David Gonzalez-Rice, between housing justice leaders Rob Robinson and Kennetha Patterson and Brian Goldstone, author of the best-selling book, There Is No Place for Us, Working and Homeless in America. This conversation is going to be on the reality of the nation's affordable housing crisis. I'm happy to welcome them to the stage. Wow, that took no time at all. Thank you all again.
But it's harder than it seems. I want to be with you.
Hi, friends. Familiar faces. Oh, I can sit down. All right, great. It's good to see so many familiar faces and friends in the audience today. I'll say just a little bit more about the folks sitting to my right. Rob Robinson is on the faculty at the New School, has been a housing justice leader for a long time, has consulted other countries and foreign cities on their homelessness response. Ms. Kennetha Patterson is an entrepreneur, leader in Nashville, involved in the homelessness choir, which I encourage you to ask her about. And Brian Goldstone's been my friend for more than 20 years, going back to days we were in grad school and neither of us was working on housing. And so this is just a serendipitous reconnection. So what we'll do, Kim mentioned Brian's book. He's been sitting out in the Advocacy Center, signing copies. The New York Times has talked about it. What we're going to do is have first our tenant leaders, folks with lived expertise, kind of describe or ask what resonated with you about the book. And to give you a little background, we've had the richest kind of planning conversations and email threads leading up to this. So if the kind of the warmth and the collaboration that's come out of there, we just got a fraction of that up on the stage, it's going to be a real treat. So Rob, I'd like to start with you on reading Brian's book, set in Atlanta. What really resonated with you?
So there's quite a bit, but first I want to thank the National Low Income Housing Coalition for inviting us here today and holding this forum. It is my second time here, and I'm appreciative of the people that they bring together from around the country. And I just want to call out two staff people that I interact with on a regular basis. The entire staff is good. Great, but I work closely with Sydney Bentecourt and Gabriella Ross, so I just want to give my props to them. So what resonated with me with the book is starting with the title, right? There's something that happens in New York. New York, we have a robust shelter system that a lot of people appreciate, but I think it's problematic. We have close to 600 shelters. And inside of those shelters, because the price of housing is so expensive, there are people that work full-time that live in New York City shelters. And I'm really going to dig a little bit deeper and mention two unions that are New York City-based unions whose members live in shelter. Transit Workers Union Local 100, there are many of those members that live in shelter. DC 3070 Municipal Workers Union, many of those members live in shelter. So the title of the book grabbed me right away and say, this is a reality because this is happening right here in New York City.
And Kennetha, same question.
Hi there. Thank you. And thank you also to National Low Income Housing Coalition. And I'm one of the members of the collective. I want to give y'all a shout out there. So what my first thoughts of the book were, just listening to it, and again, like Mr. Rob said, the title, but it made me feel like my real lived experience being homeless before. I have a large family of 7. That's how I got started in this work. And funny enough, throughout the book, I ended up hearing Housing Justice League from Atlanta. So this is where the book is based. And so I didn't connect that at first, you know, knowing that Brian is from Atlanta, and just it was a treat to hear, because when I first started out in my advocacy a good 10 years ago, I started out with Housing Justice League. That's where I learned how to organize and write to the city. So we had just done an action at the City Hall in Atlanta for the Beltline. And so we know what gentrification looks like. We know what people losing their homes look like. And also the trend of the extended stays as well. And the danger that's there. People don't know about the danger, and children have to live there. So that's just my first reaction, and that you, Brian, really listened to the people and did not exploit them. So
I'm going to ask each of you to expound a little bit before I give Brian a chance to respond. Rob, in one of our earlier conversations, you mentioned that you had in the past worked more with families with children experiencing homelessness, then focused more on individuals experiencing homelessness without any children in their care. Would you tell us a little bit about that background and some of the themes in the book?
So it was sort of the reverse, but I don't know how many people in the audience know this, but I'm formerly homeless. I spent 2.5 years on the streets of Miami, and 10 months in a New York City homeless shelter. But during that time in Miami, I was on the streets for 3 hurricanes, Rita, Katrina, and Wilma. I lived on the streets through all those. And I realized something after Hurricane Katrina had moved across the Gulf Coast and hit New Orleans and Mississippi and some of the Gulf Coast areas. I would see pictures of women bringing children over the I-9 bridge. And I knew how difficult it was for me to survive that situation. They must have gone through hell. So later on in New York, I started working with Katrina survivors, understanding that struggle. But sometimes when you understand your own issue, when you're wrapped up in your own problems, you can't see through those problems. But what I lived through made me look a little bit deeper and wonder how so many people were able to survive that hurricane, because it was a disaster.
Thanks. And Kennetha, you had talked about how, this is a book that uses what's happening in Atlanta as a way to zoom in on a national problem. And based on where you're working and living, you saw a lot of connections to your community. Would you say just a little more about that?
So I think just thinking about gentrification, there's so many warning signs, and that's a part of the learning I was talking about with being an organizer. So first kind of you go through it with lived experience, and then you're able to help others navigate through it because you've been through that. And so with Nashville and gentrification, even I've been saying the animals are gentrifying. Because you will see deer randomly in places they should not be, but it's not their fault that their home is being demolished, and so we have to think about that. So if it's into the animals, what's going on with us? That's a deep question.
Can I just follow that up a little bit? There was a story that I heard out of an area of Northwest Miami-Dade, which when I was a child, my dad was born and raised in Fort Lauderdale, so I spent a lot of time in that area of Miami. But they're redeveloping it now, so that marshland is turning into condominiums and going west. And I remember hearing a news report that a woman was screaming because an alligator was in her bathtub. And my clever deduction said, the alligator lived here for hundreds of years. You invaded his property. So he's not confused. People are confused.
Well, Brian, I want to give you a chance to reflect. In our conversations, I know it was really gratifying to you to have Rob and Kennetha kind of pick out things that you were trying to accomplish in your book and have that resonate with them. So just start there.
Yeah. I know we don't have a ton of time, so I won't talk about all the reasons why this is so special for me right now to be here with the coalition, which has been so utterly decisive for those of us who want to write about these issues and think about these issues, but specifically to be with you, Kennetha and Rob. And even if I flew here just to have lunch earlier, it was so meaningful. So I won't go on too much about that. But the title, as I've been going around to different communities over the last year, since the book has come out, I've realized that this title, There Is No Place for Us, which comes from Britt, a mother in the book whose roots in Atlanta go back 5 generations, who realized as a young adult with 2 children, realized that her capacity to stay housed in the city of her birth would be contingent on winning a voucher lottery somehow, some way. The fact that we even use the word lottery in connection with this most essential human thing is itself damning. Yeah. It's itself an indictment. But she knew if she was going to stay housed here, she would have to get a voucher. Finally, she gets the voucher. She wins the lottery. 2 years later, when the book starts, she's gotten off the waiting list. And fast forward through her story, she ends up getting off the waiting list, but she can't find a landlord who will accept the voucher. It expires before it can be used after getting an extension. And the year that it expires, incidentally, there were something like 1,800 vouchers issued in Atlanta that year, families who got off the waiting list, and something like 1,100 expired before they could be used. So she loses the voucher, that hope is dashed. And then and I only mention this because I'm here at the forum, and this is probably the only audience I'll ever speak with that will appreciate this, but she got into a LIHC development, and unbeknownst to her and her neighbors, the property owner was able to exploit the qualified contract provision, loophole, whatever you want to call it, and she and her neighbors had the misfortune of living near the Beltline. This thing that, as almost like a magic wand, whatever it touches, property values are soaring, boutique hotels are appearing, and poor and working class people are getting pushed out, and that happens to be intensely racialized as well. So the landlord, the property owner, notifies everyone they have to leave. This is during the pandemic. And finally, I go with Britt one day back. This is months after she and her children have now been plunged into homelessness as a result of this displacement. We go back to the site, and she looks around and she says, wow, there's a beer garden, Red's Beer Garden, that has appeared across the street. And there's this beautiful new apartment complex that's opened up, the Skylark, with all these amenities and an art gallery in the lobby. And she looks around at everything. She says, wow, this place is going to be so nice when it's finished. And then she catches herself. She remembers, she says, but for me and my kids, there's no place for us. And that's, I mean, yes, that's a material statement. That's a statement of her material deprivation, but it's also an existential statement. It's a statement about not having a place in this city that she can go. And she says earlier in the book, she says, why should I leave? This city is as much mine as anyone's. Why should I have to go somewhere cheaper? And by the way, Atlanta was supposed to be that somewhere cheaper. It was supposed to be the place that you go. And so what has been so striking is that title, There Is No Place for... Yes, it's an Atlanta title. Yes, condensed in that title is the reality that people like Britt are working not just one job, but multiple jobs, and it isn't enough to secure this most basic material necessity. Forget about getting rich. Yes, it's an Atlanta title in that all this rampant gentrification, the renaissance of urban space is happening not just alongside all of this dispossession and displacement, but is actively fueling it. There's a causal relationship there. Yes, all of that is true. Yes, Atlanta remains one of the epicenters for evictions in this country, on and on. But for all of those reasons, not despite those reasons, for all of those reasons, for the reason that this crisis of homelessness, this crisis of housing precarity is being fueled not by a failing economy, but a thriving economy, a booming economy, that it's a crisis of prosperity. For all of those reasons, There Is No Place for Us is as much a Nashville title, a Chicago title, a Miami title. All you have to do is read The Gap or read the Out of Reach report to see that There Is No Place for Us is truly an American title today. It is the rule, not the exception. And I think that is what is so powerful about what you've both said, both here and in our other conversations, just because lines need to be dots need to be connected. Yes, this is deeply local, a lot of this, but there's a solidarity. Just as the crisis extends beyond municipal boundaries, beyond city boundary, so too solidarity can exist along in ways that might not be obvious.
Brian, when I asked David for a little permission to respond to you, but you took the words out of my mouth when you said it's not just an Atlanta issue, it's across the country, right? So the fundamental problem that we all need to understand is wages don't rise as fast as the cost of housing. There are some perpetuated myths that home ownership leads to wealth. I'll debate that with anybody because I think that's a falsehood. I believe it leads to perpetual debt. But I think we also have to understand that poverty has been an issue that has been pervasive in this country since it was created.
I wanted to hear from each of you, Kennetha and Rob. We talked a bit about kind of shortcomings in the way this country responds to homelessness and in the kind of the charity framework. And then I know Brian's got thoughts about that in connection with how we count homelessness. So why don't we start with you, Kennetha, and then you, Rob?
Okay, so I in my heart feel like we need to move away from charity. We need to be bringing solutions that bring sustainability instead, and that's how the homeless choir was actually born, because we decided to take away the monotony of, people can withhold money from us. So when actually the collective, we visited the Resora, and I found out about the Freedom Singers and that they funded the movement. And so I'm like, oh, we riding this wave right here, because we're now, I feel like, officially Freedom Singers for ending homelessness. And that's the goal throughout. The founder wants to have people in every state to do the creative arts, and then you could, like Mr. Rob said, you can attain your whatever and have homes. And I'm right now in a global cohort, and I'm looking at geodesic domes. So that's just something, public education and learning beyond what they allow you to. And then when you're homeless, you really don't think you have, I guess, just being inside of it, for me, it felt like I was in a washing machine being tumbled about, and I was trying to figure out how to get out. And then I wondered when the dryer cycle was gonna start tumbling me about. So it was just situations like that when I first started out, and I started to get stronger and stronger over the course. So in all that, charity did not help at all. Charity hindered. And charity kept the money that never trickles down to the people. So I think take charity out of it and just listen to the people for one, because without us, you don't have a homelessness problem without the people.
I'm hearing empowerment and agency in what you're describing. Rob?
So one thing I used to, in my early days of organizing and activism, I thought about this thing called a voucher. It's a piece of paper. It doesn't guarantee you a home.
It doesn't.
Right? And we have to start thinking different. And I tried my best to get people to understand that. It's a challenge. I understand when you're desperate looking for a place to live, and this might be a ticket to a home, but it has its own set of flaws. What we need to do is rethink how we relate to land and housing. What we don't often talk about, and there's no criticism pointed at anybody, but the work that I did post-foreclosure crisis thought about land, right? You'll never control housing until you control the land that it sits on. We have to think differently, folks. Land is a commodity, and housing is a commodity, does not work for a large portion of our society. We have to, thank you. We have to think differently about these two things.
Brian.
Yeah, before I became a journalist, I have a background in anthropology, and something that we like to do in Anthro 101 courses is say that the point of anthropology is to make the familiar strange, to take things that we take for granted, that have become status quo, and interrogate them with fresh eyes. And nowhere, I am now convinced, is that more urgently needed in our country than when it comes to housing, because it should strike us, and hopefully it strikes everyone in this room, but it should strike us as a society as completely bizarre that we have allowed this essential public good, this thing that is just so fundamental to just living, the infrastructure of a livable life, to be hoarded up and auctioned off to the highest bidder. I remember early in the pandemic, there were two brothers in Tennessee who were widely and justifiably vilified for going around Tennessee to Dollar Generals and buying hand sanitizer and masks, and then they were selling them on eBay and Amazon for $80, $90 a pop. And I was thinking, that's what we've done to housing. But we don't call it by its proper name. We don't call it price gouging during an undeclared state of emergency. We just call it the market. We just call it supply and demand economics. And so the idea that we can get out of this not natural disaster, but this inherently man-made catastrophe by just like begging the market, tweaking the market, cajoling the market, pleading with the market, please take these vouchers, please house not the people on the fringes of society, the people whose labor, whose work is actually making all this growth, all what we call disastrously, euphemistically, a good economy, a booming economy, people whose work, whose labor is making all of that possible, and we're begging, please house them, please. And we settle, and as you can hear, incidentally, like, I've given up any pretense of being a dispassionate journalist or observer. So I apologize that I get carried away a little. But we're here in D.C., we're here, yes, this bill just passed the Senate. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. But we just settle for these scraps from the table. I mean, and when we come at it from this, what I would like to think of as an anthropological perspective, a perspective that says, no, when someone loses their home because a Wall Street investor decided that this shelter was a vehicle for accumulating wealth, and they lose their home because the market now says it's a good time to sell that property, and you get to, that does not call for charity, that calls for justice, right? And it's like when we have that reframing that Rob was just talking about, I think we can start to say that those scraps are just an insult. They're woefully inadequate. But we've just, anyway, I'll stop there.
But you know what, though, Brian, it's dangled in front of us, right? So, folks, I want you to walk away thinking something that I'm going to lay out right now. You want to be a homeowner, and I'm not. Listen, we should all have a safe, affordable, clean, dignified place to live. But the way it happens now is you got to go into debt to prove to a bank that you have a good credit rating so you can go deeper into debt to buy a home. It's bizarre, folks.
Wow. And I think when the U.S. has bad credit. So how you checking our credit? So, yeah.
Guys, I want to give you each a chance for a kind of a parting thought for either for one of each other or for the audience, your choice. So I'm going to go Rob, Kennetha, Brian.
I just hope that this audience, number one, reads the book and understands the stories that folks are sharing, to understand that this is a social problem, not an individual problem that we've created in this country. Thank you. What people are going through is a struggle. I was able to get out of that struggle easier than a lot of folks and to land on my feet, and my life has changed, but a lot of people are left behind and struggling behind it. So understand that homelessness is something that we can change, right? And we change it by using a model called Housing First, which we deny in this country. Our methodology here is if we find somebody who may have a chemical or alcohol addiction, a drug addiction, or could have mental illness, we got to fix you first before we give you a home. You got to go into a program. I've seen the results in places like Finland where they've gotten to functional zero with homelessness, right? And they are successful programs. So we need to think differently of how we approach this program and bring different methodologies to it. And I'll just say this quickly, when I started out working on homelessness in New York City, there were 25,000 people a night in shelter. Last night, there were 89,000.
Oh, that is no decrease. So I say housing is health care. Housing is the nucleus of every family. Without it, everything literally goes haywire. But with it, we create stability, dignity, and legacy. That is the work I stand in, and that's the work that we will continue. I said I, but I'm saying we will continue. So that's my closing.
It's been really encouraging to hear from people who have read this book. Like, it's made me more compassionate. It's made me more empathetic. And compassion is wonderful. Empathy is wonderful. God knows we need more of that right now. But what I really hope, people who encounter, readers who encounter the family stories, these families who miraculously allowed me to immerse myself in their lives, to follow their journeys. And I use miraculously very intentional because it truly is mind-blowing to me that they would have the generosity to allow me to just accompany, to just be a presence with them. But my hope is that when readers encounter these family stories and readers see how at every single turn in their journeys, there are entire business models designed to capitalize on their precarity, to exacerbate it, to squeeze as much profit as can be squeezed from their predicament so as to prolong it. And to see all the utterly preventable ways that this suffering, that this toxic stress, and just linger on that phrase, toxic stress so chronic and debilitating that it fundamentally alters brain chemistry. It chokes off futures before they've even started in children. And to witness that up close, I felt rage. The dominant feeling that I had while reporting this book was rage. Yes, grief, but rage. And my hope is that readers that rage will be transmitted, not this objectless anger, but a very targeted anger at all of the very specific ways that we have allowed this calamity to just proliferate unchecked. And a couple of weeks ago, the Washington Post ran a story, a scoop that the Pentagon was, quote, struggling to figure out how to spend the extra $500 billion that the Trump administration wants to give it for the next fiscal year. And here we are talking about, can we get 15% of units at 60% AMI? I mean, it's just, this stuff is so solvable, it's so preventable, and I think it's easy at conferences sometimes, because I've certainly fallen prey to, for these things to become abstractions, and to talk about housing units, and to talk about production, and to even talk about homelessness in this way up here in the clouds. This hurts. There is pain, and I feel embarrassed when some of that just comes out even in my voice, but I feel like a lot of us could benefit from having even our voices inflected by the pain that our neighbors are experiencing, not to mention the ways that we ourselves, so many of us, are one missed paycheck, one medical emergency, one lapsed month of childcare from being pushed, not falling, but being pushed into homelessness ourselves.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Kennetha. Thank you, Rob. Thank all of you. Be encouraged, friends. Bring the energy to our Hill Days tomorrow and in your work in your communities back home.
Thank you.
Can't be claimed she ain't sure.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That was such a wonderful session. We're so grateful to the panel that we just heard, so thank you for that. If you can just take a seat for one moment. We just want to take a moment of silence, just a few seconds. I just recently learned that one of our Leadership Council members, Karen Hill, who served as the chairperson on the National Low-Income Housing Board many years back, but she passed away. And I know that each year we bring together, when we have this forum, we bring together our Leadership Council members. And these are people, it's comprised of board members or chairs of the board and former presidents and CEOs. And Karen Hill was a miraculous woman, from what I understand. I never had the opportunity to meet her in person. Actually, I did one time 2 years ago at our 50th anniversary. But I understand that she used to come to the forum regularly. But again, she passed away recently. So I just want to take a moment of silence, just a few seconds, just to honor Ms. Karen Hill. And thank you for that. Really appreciate it. All right, so next, I want to bring up our current board chair, Dr. Bambi Hayes Brown.
How's everyone doing today? All right. We get ready to close us out. I'm gonna treat y'all like one of Elizabeth Taylor's husbands. I'm not gonna hold you long. Well, get us in and out of here. So thank you all so much. Over the past few days, we have had plenty of powerful ideas, important research, and deeply personal stories. We've learned from one another and strengthened our partnerships and recommitted ourselves for the work ahead. And what makes gatherings such as these more meaningful is not only the conversations that happen during the meetings, but also the community that's formed around us and the commitment to housing justice. And looking out in this room, it is clear that we have a community that is strong, determined, and deeply committed, and that so that everyone has safe and stable housing and an affordable place to call home. And I can definitely resonate with the book because I lived in an extended stay for 3 years, just south of Atlanta, 9 miles south, because I couldn't afford to live in Atlanta. So I had to go to where I could afford to live, which was at extended stay. And then I quickly learned I couldn't afford to live there. But it was programs like many of you run here today, motel to homes programs, that got me out of that hotel and got me into a stable place to rent. And so I do want to mention what I failed to mention on yesterday is that we're always accepting nominations for our board of directors, which includes low-income members, 6 representatives of national organizations, 6 representatives from the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, state partners, and up to 7 unrestricted or at-large partners. So if you're interested in serving on the board, please come see one of us, and we'll be glad to take you through that process. And in addition to the coalition's board, I'd like to recognize our major sponsors who, without their generous support, the National Low-Income Housing Coalition's efforts to achieve housing justice would not be possible. So thank you so much to our partners. And I also like to acknowledge our special members who have a stake in our work and a seat at our policy table, and we're so grateful to their contributions for our efforts, and their names have been scrolling throughout this conference. So it is my pleasure to turn it back over to our illustrious President and CEO, Renee Willis.
Thank you, Dr. Bambi. Thank you, Dr. Bambi. And I thank you, and I'm so grateful for your leadership as well as board chair. So thank you for all that you have done to lift up the coalition. And I also want to offer a special thanks to our board members as well. Many of them are here in the front or in the room. So we thank you for your service. And as Dr. Bambi mentioned, we're looking for new board members. So please do reach out to us if you're interested in serving on the board. So thank you. Thank you again. And I also, too, I can't believe we're here at closing time. It feels so strange. We've been a community and for the last couple of days now. And we're coming to a close for this portion of the forum. What we will do next is very important. Friday, Capitol Hill Day. And I know that you all are excited about it and ready for it. And then you're going to go meet with members of Congress, or at least their staff, tomorrow. And you're going to speak with courage and conviction. And that's what we need in this moment. So we're really excited that you'll be doing that tomorrow. I also, too, before we close out, I want to offer a special thanks to the staff of the National Low Income Housing Coalition. And if you're in this room, team, because I know they're spread throughout the hotel, but if you could please stand, we would love to say thank you and recognize you. Thank you, team. Go team NLIHC. And also, too, a special thanks to all of the things you see. You know, we're in this new space, and you see all the branding and all the things. It's the behind-the-scenes team, too, our comms team that is just crushing it. So a special thanks to our comms team for all the work that they've poured into this. Special thanks to Lisa Marlowe, who is the Senior Director of Communications, and all the work that she has poured into this as well. But too, I don't know if Adele Chenier is in the room, our Senior Director of Events, and she may not be because it's quiet, but go Adele, thank you. Thank you, Adele, for everything that you have done to get us to this point. We're excited again to be in this new space, and we were all learning the space, right? And we understood that we had a few members to go over to the old hotel, but we're glad we're all here connected today. So thank you to everyone. I have a few housekeeping things that I need to share with you as well, and it's regarding tomorrow, Hill Day. So there will be a Hill Day bus located on T Street. So that's the street that's near the registration table. So there will be a bus there. It's ADA accessible. It will run from 7 a.m. and it will end at the hotel at 4 p.m. So it will go back and forth as needed. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we have a Leadership Awards reception this evening. And so if you have a Leadership Awards reception ticket, you'll need to go to the registration table to pick up that ticket to attend that ceremony this evening. You will also receive a survey. We want to know how we did. And we also want to know how we can improve for next year. So you'll receive a survey from the staff. And I want to thank you all. I want to thank you all for spending the last several days here in community, connecting with one another, learning from one another. Because I know that you're going to take all of the things that you learned over the past couple of days back to your community. But I also want to thank you for what you have done throughout the year and years to get us to this point. We could not do any of this without you all, and we need each other in this fight. So I thank you all for everything that you've done. And I think that is it.
All right.
I think that's it, y'all. We're going to close this portion out. Thank you. And because we're going to have a Leadership Awards reception in this room, how do you say this nicely? Gotta go. That's right. Thank you all. Safe travels to Capitol Hill Day.